It's a pleasure to be with you all today. I see we've been ranging between 115 and 120 people. So not surprisingly always, but particularly right now, workforce development really matters. So wanted to start out just as a very quick reminder. We talk about carbon neutral roadmaps, and we are thinking about climate change often. And of course, that's why the biggest reason we're doing it. But there are so many values to carbon neutral buildings. I don't need to read the list to you. This is not comprehensive. This is just the highlights. And so when we think about creating this roadmap, we want everyone to be just thinking about also all of these additionalities, if you will, of benefits as we go through this. So next slide, please. So today we're working on what are the outcomes here, and we're really in this process, as Greg said, of getting input for the carbon neutral buildings roadmap and the electrification roadmap. And this session, we're really looking to understand a few things. Importantly, where are the gaps that employers are experiencing in workforce development today? Want to talk about prioritizing key workforce needs in New York, particularly with relative to the building stock. We want to understand what the ongoing initiatives are in this space and perhaps your ideas on new initiatives. Learn about those initiatives that are targeting incumbent workers in efforts to identify future workforce needs. And lastly, learn about initiatives to increase economic opportunity for the unemployed and disadvantaged workers. Next slide, please. Okay, so we had we sent out a survey in advance. I'm sorry, my screen just blinked on me. And we asked for 3 pieces of information from you all up front as we worked on this. And you'll see personal information, employers and labor unions. And I wanted to just share a very top level highlight of what we've heard so far. And really, there's 4 buckets here. One is around skill shortages identified in the next 3, 5, and 10 years. Some of what we heard in there are math skills, installation and maintenance of heat pumps, other HVAC services, medium and low voltage work, building automation, systems controls. Second bucket was how can we work towards a skilled workforce impacted by COVID-19? And a couple of responses there of interest are, despite COVID-19, crucial skills will still be needed. That won't change. And secondly, if demand and opportunity are present, we will meet needs with our existing national training infrastructure. The third bucket was potential avenues for addressing skill gaps. Here we heard training in new technologies and affordable education via trade schools as an important response. And lastly, other activities that incentives can be combined with. We heard NYSERDA webinars to provide workforce training and advanced systems and energy conservation, and assistance in transportation to training sites, particularly for low-income populations. Now, we invite additional comments. This is just what we've heard so far. So this survey and poll will be open until Friday, and the link is here. And I am sure that post this process today, this deck will get sent back out. So with that, let's keep moving along. And next, we are going to hear from Emily Dean, the Director of Market Development, and Emily is going to set the stage for us in New York. Now, Emily, as I said, is the Director of Market Development at NYSERDA, where she leads the development and implementation of carbon reduction strategies across our housing sectors, local governments, and communities, and workforce development and training. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you, Scott. Can you hear me?
I can.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really good to be with you today. Thank you all for joining us for this discussion. As Greg Hale indicated in his presentation, in 2019 we saw record job growth in the clean energy economy. But it's really imperative to set the stage in terms of where we are today and recognize the impacts that our sector is experiencing due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So this slide, really speaks to the historic job losses that our clean energy sector has experienced due to the pandemic. the economy at large has experienced unprecedented job losses, and clean energy has been no exception. So according to analysis recently published by BW Research that probably many on the line have already read and digested, they're reporting nearly 600,000 U.S. clean energy workers have lost their jobs in March and April of this year. So that accounts for a 17% drop in clean energy employment. Here in New York, they are reporting a loss of over 20,000 clean energy jobs. So that's 12% of our clean energy workforce here in New York. The analysis also indicates and forecasts that we could, in our sector, lose up to 850,000 jobs by the end of June of this year if the current conditions continue. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this slide drills down a bit into the numbers in terms of segments of the clean energy economy as well as states. And I think what's critical for today's discussion is that energy efficiency, which has always been the largest segment of our clean energy economy, accounts for 70% of the losses that we're seeing. That of course makes sense. These are the jobs that require being in buildings, being in homes, which has all been put on pause. So these numbers are frankly devastating. And as New York State starts to return to work in a safe manner, and certain regions of the state currently are being allowed to restart construction work, including energy efficiency work, we'll be looking closely at how that allows us to reclaim some of those jobs that have been lost. Next slide, please. So here in New York, workforce has been and continues to be, and is probably even more so, the top priority to meet our climate goals, and in this environment to support economic recovery and our ability to build back better. It really cannot be emphasized enough that sustaining and growing our clean energy workforce is fundamental to achieving our climate goals. The goals that the mandates that Greg described that are codified in our climate law, whether it's building new renewable energy capacity or decarbonizing and electrifying existing buildings in every county of New York State, that doesn't happen without a skilled workforce to deliver that. Furthermore, this is why Governor Cuomo, in his 2020 State of the State address, directed NYSERDA to invest over $100 million in clean energy workforce training over the next 5 years to train over 40,000 workers in this sector. So this will include upskilling existing workers across sectors, so efficiency, energy storage, renewables, and throughout the supply chain, whether that's technical sales, design, installation, commissioning, operations, and maintenance. We want to support every job category and title throughout this economy. Furthermore, we know we need to attract new entrants to the clean energy economy, and we'll be developing programs to support that. Greg spoke earlier about the integral focus that our climate mandate has on supporting disadvantaged communities across the state and ensuring a just transition. And that is integral to how we are approaching workforce development and training programs, including placing a priority on serving and placing historically disadvantaged populations in the well-paying, good-paying, high-quality jobs that will be sustained and created by this clean energy transition. Next slide, please. So I do want to take just a quick moment to spotlight some of the funding that NYSERDA has available today. These are programs that are on the street today that many on the phone are already taking advantage of. So this includes $14 million to support businesses in hiring new workers. So this is a wage subsidy program for clean energy businesses to bring on new workforce and help subsidize them getting up to full productivity. And this includes a 50% wage subsidy, but we've also modified it recently to account for a 75% wage subsidy for those positions that are working in building electrification. We also have $9 million available now to support clean energy internships. We have $4 million on the table right now to work with training organizations and businesses to develop the training capacity, whether it's new curriculum, training trainers, equipment, transitioning existing training to online training, modifying or developing new apprenticeship programs. These are the types of programs that we are supporting through this capacity building initiative. And finally, we also have $8 million available today to work with building owners, operators, superintendents, property managers to train the building operations and maintenance workforce to operate buildings efficiently and to be ready for the new technologies that will be deployed as part of this decarbonization transition. Next slide, please. Finally, I just want to spotlight some of the recent changes that we've made in response to the industry's feedback in terms of what they need to sort of sustain their workers and how we can help. So we have modified our on-the-job training and clean energy internship programs to increase subsidies and to add more flexibility. We're also in the process of developing a free online training course on heat pumps and building electrification, really focused on the needs of both the residential building stock and the multifamily and commercial building stock. And that will be launched later this month. We're also funding subscriptions for online training platforms for contractors and partners working in NYSERDA and utility programs to use some of this downtime to upskill, refresh, and develop new skill sets across the energy efficiency and electrification space. And those will be available later this month, later in June. And finally, I do want to acknowledge that at the beginning of this, at the beginning of the COVID crisis, we scanned what is available currently in terms of clean energy training, and we've published an inventory on our website of free training that is available, and we welcome your help in sharing that and distributing that among your networks so that people can take advantage of some really high quality free training that is already available. So with that, I think I will turn it over to Scott.
How important workforce development is going forward to our climate goals and the $108 million investment that is targeted in the state to train 40,000 workers over the next 5 years. That it's for all people, not just some people. That it was great to hear all of the existing initiatives, the $35 million worth of initiatives and programs to support workforce development today. And then that the state's being sensitive and adapting in this COVID world that we're all in. So thank you very much for setting the stage for us. We're now going to move on to our first session, which is really it's titled Advancing Opportunities for Workforce Development and Job Training. And in a way, we're trying to think about where are the gaps and understanding those pieces. So next slide, please. The notion here is that these are going to be really lightning rounds, like no more than 5 minutes per presentation. So we're going to be moving fast. And I'm going to first introduce the panelists, and then we'll have them hop into their quick presentations. So first, Jeff Van Rott is the Executive Director of Climate Jobs New York and the Climate Jobs New York Education Fund, which is a broad and growing coalition of labor unions representing more than 2.6 million working New Yorkers united to combat climate change and create good jobs. Next slide, please. Ellen Honingstock is the director is responsible for Urban Green Council's public programs, where she's the director of education. She's also responsible for Urban Green's signature educational programs, And under her direction, Urban Green has trained over 22,000 workers from all sectors. Next slide, please. Maracesaro is the Senior Program Officer for Green City Force. Mara currently leads GCF's alumni services and sectoral employment projects. She's designed, managed, and executed alumni career initiatives with key partners to ensure quality jobs for GCF graduates in the evolving fields of sustainability and resiliency in an urban setting. Next slide, please. And Gary Barbera is the president of the Green, president of the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York. Sorry about that. Since 2009, and he's embarked on ambitious negotiations for project labor agreements to provide labor cost savings to advance major public and private projects at risk of stalling due to the economic recession. These efforts have resulted in excess of 100 billion in public sector labor agreements. So I believe next we will have Jeff is going to begin. I think that's, oh, and we have Mark. I'm sorry. Sorry about that, Mark. And Mark Bremmer is a lecturer at SUNY Polytechnic Institute. That's what he's doing currently, and also a doctoral student. And we welcome him as well. He's principal investigator for the multi-campus SUNY Green Building Experiential Learning Collaborative. So welcome to all of our presenters. And I do think Jeff is first up. Is that right?
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate the chance to be part of this session. And we look forward to continuing to work with NYSERDA to make the carbon neutral buildings roadmap and the building electrification roadmap as strong as they can be, and to set them up for a successful implementation. In the time that I have, I want to do two things. I want to provide a brief introduction to Climate Jobs New York, in case there are those who haven't heard about us, and just spend a minute doing that. And then talk about the role that building retrofits of the kind that we're talking about here, the role that they can play in a green recovery, and why they're exactly the kind of projects we need right now, the opportunities to create good jobs and good careers. Emily provided some important and sobering context there. But I'll start with just a bit about Climate Jobs New York first. After Superstorm Sandy, the Worker Institute at Cornell convened a group of unions to look at the role that labor should be playing in combating climate change. And that was really in recognition of three things. It was the fact that climate change was already affecting union members, and that it was disproportionately affecting vulnerable communities. The fact that labor has a lot to bring to the table when it comes to advancing bold climate action. And also the fact that we need to be involved in shaping these new industries from the beginning. If you think about the oil and gas jobs, for example, that became good family supporting, community supporting jobs, that didn't just happen automatically. It's because they organized, and the same is true here. So in 2017, the participating unions and Cornell put out a great report that laid out an agenda for both combating climate change and inequality in New York. And at that point, some of the participating labor leaders said, well, we can't just let this be a good report. We've got to do something with this. And that's when Climate Jobs New York was born. And we are, as Scott said, we are a broad and growing coalition of labor unions. Our members represent over 2.6 million working New Yorkers. And clearly our strength and effectiveness comes from our member unions, and a number of whom are represented here. Gary LaBarbera is going to speak. Vinny Alvarez will be speaking later in the program. They're both central leaders of Climate Jobs, and other key members will be participating during this session. The last thing I want to say about Climate Jobs is that I think it's important to recognize that some of our most active unions have members who stand to lose jobs as we transition away from fossil fuels. And they are looking ahead to the industries of tomorrow at the same time that they're looking out for workers who are currently working in fossil industries. And Climate Jobs New York is very much the same. We are focused very much both on the exciting opportunities to build new industries and the need for a thoughtful, just, responsible transition for the workers and communities currently in the fossil fuel industries. So with that, I'll move on to a green recovery. And and the role that building retrofits can play in that. I think we all recognize that getting the economy going again is not going to be as easy as flipping a switch. The numbers that Emily talked about highlighted that over 36 million people have lost their jobs in this crisis, and I think that's an underestimate. It's going to require an investment on the scale that we haven't seen since the Great Depression, and we've seen some of that already, but there will have to be more. And I think we have to be clear-eyed about the fact that the investments we make now will either further entrench our reliance on fossil fuels or put us on a path to a low carbon economy. And if we take that more forward-looking path, and if we do it right, we can address three crises at the same time. Economic crisis resulting from COVID-19, there's the climate crisis, and there's the crisis of inequality, extreme inequality, that's been growing for some time. And if we do this right, we can address all three. So in building retrofits can play a central role in pushing that more forward-thinking path. The gold standard of stimulus measures right now is to be able to do three things at the same time. You put people back to work relatively quickly. You do the work we know we need to do to take on climate change, and you create good jobs and good careers. And retrofits can do all of those things. We can and should make the 2020s the retrofit decade. It puts people back to work relatively quickly. It builds what we know we need to build to take on climate change, and we can have a significant impact on emissions, as well as having cost savings down the road, which is another impact. And if we do it right, we can create good jobs and good careers. So I want to just close by focusing in on the third factor, because we really can't afford to lose another decade of wage growth coming out of this recession. And the traditional ways of achieving good jobs and good careers, project labor agreements, prevailing wage requirements, are all going to be crucial here. There are other concrete steps we can take, but one of the most important steps is directly relevant to this session on training and workforce development, and that is enlisting the labor management sponsored training programs that are already operating in this sector. And those are world-class training programs. They're well connected to companies and careers, and they're there to be enlisted in this process. So I'll stop there. I know Gary and others will talk more about that, but I'm looking forward to the rest of the session, and thanks again for the chance to participate.
Of the economic crisis with COVID, climate, and inequality, and the idea of making the 2020s the retrofit decade. We need a marketing person to work with you on that, and to make sure we're taking advantage of all those great initiatives that exist, like you talked about with the labor management sponsored training program. So thank you so much. Ellen, I think you're up next, and so take it away.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. So can you go to the first slide, which is really just my name, Ellen Honingstock. I'm the Director of Education for Urban Green. I'm really proud to work for Urban Green. Our mission is to transform buildings for a sustainable future in New York City and around the world. All right, go to the next slide, please. So what I want to first tell you, if you go to the next one, I want to just explain what we do in terms of education. In the last 10 years, we've educated over 36,000 people, including all of our public programs. And our two main offerings are GPRO and energy code training. GPRO for contractors, trades, building operators, and facility managers, and energy code training for architects, engineers, builders, and code officials. If you've been following us for a while, over the years, you'll have seen us teach people how to crack the code, then conquer the code, and now we're teaching people how to crush the code. And even though these courses target different audiences, the one thing they have in common is that we don't teach people how to do their trade, right? They come in knowing how to do their jobs, and we fill in the green gap between how they learned how to do their job and how to do their job in a more energy efficient way. We've taught people all over the US and Canada, and as well as many of the largest building construction unions. And they are fantastic partners because they have such robust training programs in place, and they're already leaders in the industry. Until recently, all of our courses were in person. And of course, now we're 100% online, we're remote. And moving forward, the remote has worked really, really well and will probably continue both formats. So if you go to the next slide, please. The through line in all of our educational offerings is there's two things. One is systems thinking, right? How does the thing work? Once somebody understands more about how the whole thing works, they never understand it. They never go backward, right? So that's critical in all of our training, whether it's, how the energy code fits together and how, the envelope affects the HVAC systems, or how fixing a leaky toilet can save thousands of dollars a year, whatever it is. And people also don't realize how much they didn't know coming in and then go on to fill in their own gaps. And the second piece is how to take actionable steps, right? Because so many people in our classes tell us, they even though they know what to do, but if they knew how to take the first steps, they would have done it already. They don't know how to start. All right, go to the next one, please. For many years, our go-to metric was always, on our surveys, did you learn something today that you will use in your job tomorrow? This was super important to us. We always scored really high on this, like 94%, 95%. But it occurred to us a few years ago that, tomorrow is just too short of a time horizon. So we launched something that we call GPRO at Work, and we've started our first pilot programs through NYSERDA Training Pond. And it's essentially a coaching program to supplement the GPRO O&M classroom training. In the classroom, the individual students develop action items based on strategies they're learning that they could be doing in their buildings, but that they haven't yet done. And then GPRO at Work helps these teams implement those action items. All right, go to the next one, please. So we were asked in preparing this little presentation to come up with some gaps that we noticed in the industry. So I have 3, and this doesn't count anything COVID related at all. This is, that's not my area of expertise anyway. So number 1 is improving energy code enforcement, especially upstate. The differences between upstate and downstate, besides the new, the stringency in the code, it's really stark when it comes to the infrastructure that New York City has in the context of a consolidated approach to enforcement, compliance, and we have actual rules and instructions on how people should comply. But when we teach upstate, it's like speaking another language. And even if the stretch code were adopted across the entire state, I still think with the given gaps in code enforcement statewide, that we're just not going to be able to achieve the simulated performance that the code envisions without a more consistent approach to compliance and enforcement. The second one is to train organizations, not individuals, right? You can teach everything that is known from the beginning of time to one person on the team, but if that person doesn't have influence on things like budgets, timelines, procurement, nothing is ever going to happen. And I completely agree with what Jeff said earlier about retrofits, and the way to have more retrofits is to get teams working better together. So my number 3 is for retrofits. We need an army of project managers and owners reps. These teams need to be better at things like soliciting bids from designers and contracts who understand the newest technologies. And I'm not talking about sophisticated owners or the ones who use the contractors in the NYSERDA programs. I'm talking about like the rest of everybody, right? As an example, organizations, big ones, small ones, they're still using bidders lists from generations ago, right? They can only use approved vendors, but those vendors don't necessarily overlap with the kinds of strategies they're trying to implement. Another example is, how are we going to get heat pumps into multifamily buildings, right? We talk about this all the time, but the disconnect in the context of like what co-op boards normally do and what we're talking about is miles apart, right? So this goes back to training organizations, because so many of them are constrained by their own procedures, right? So one little change gets made and the whole thing falls apart. And a lot of organizations have never done a retrofit, so they just don't even know how to start, and I need a lot of hand-holding. So these folks, between training teams and having experts who know how to move things forward, I think is really critical. And then in the next one, I might be done. I am finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellen, so much. It's good to hear about the work of Urban Green and the great training that you're doing. I love this idea of not just meeting the code, but crushing the code was fascinating and spot on. The approach to fill in gaps around with the green gaps, as you called them, was insightful. The notion of going beyond what what will help them tomorrow to a longer and more enduring method. And we seem to have a trend of creating three-legged stools. So your three-legged stool of gaps to help us point our way forward was fascinating. It was really helpful and illustrative as well. So I think with that, thank you very much, Ellen. And I believe Mara is next. So if we could go to the next slide. Welcome, Mara.
Thank you, Scott. I'm honored to be on this panel today as both a NYSERDA workforce trainer and a NYSERDA contractor for Empower New York. I'm here to talk about the unique experiential learning platform that we use at Green City Force, which is completely aligned with supporting a just transition for historically disadvantaged populations that both Emily and Greg referenced earlier. Green City Forest trains young leaders to power a green and inclusive economy through service. We're founded in 2009, and we're an AmeriCorps program that engages young NYCHA, New York City Housing Authority residents in impactful service toward sustainability on a path toward careers. If I could have the next slide, please. On this slide, you'll see what we call a core member journey map. It begins with our key anchor partner, which is NYCHA. And NYCHA young adults between the ages of 18 to 24 face unemployment rates of 70% and higher, and those are pre-COVID-19 stats. These are underserved communities that have historically been most directly impacted by economic, environmental, and health inequities. We engage our young adults in a holistic program with national service as its central focus. Young adults work in teams on an array of service initiatives connected to conserving energy, healthy eating, sustainable living, zero waste, and community engagement. It's through this service program that participants receive regular feedback and career coaching to develop their essential workplace skills. We talk so much in workforce development about what technical training and how we're getting folks ready for this new economy, and it really begins with that initial career interest. So helping folks build those essential workplace skills and test them out. Attendance, punctuality, teamwork, work ethic, problem solving, and all of that is built upon a foundation of civic responsibility and grit, which we define as the power of passion and perseverance. So by graduation, all of our folks have completed some baseline industry recognized credentials, including OSHA 10, OSHA 30, and shout out to Ellen and the team at Urban Green, GPRO, Fundamentals of Building Green, and Operation and Maintenance Essentials. And then you'll see on the right-hand part of that slide, this bubble of alumnihood. And Green City Force manages a talent pipeline of alumni. We facilitate this interview process to match graduates with both in-house work opportunities related to energy efficiency contracts with our own social enterprise. As I said, in addition to being a trainer, we're also a contractor, and with external employer partners. So we cultivate and support employer partners to really maximize job offerings for our graduates. So super thankful for all of the amazing workforce development ponds that NYSERDA has put out. We're taking advantage of many of them. Upon graduation, we work with our alumni to secure employment in a sector we define as sustainable buildings and resilient communities. So it encompasses a wide array of jobs from renewables, utilities, behind the meter, construction, operations, management of buildings, and also things like waste management, recycling, composting, in addition to green infrastructure, horticulture, and food production. So it's a pretty wide sector. Can I have the next slide, please? On the next slide, you're going to see an overview of our key service initiatives on the left, Love Where You Live and Farms at NYCHA, and also a note about our role as a contractor through our social enterprise. In that lower right corner, the Eco Hubs, that's a bit of a preview of what's to come next and how we really look at not only a whole building approach, but a whole community approach to eco literacy. Can I have the next slide, please? On this one, you'll see that from our alumni pool, 65% of graduates are employed in energy and buildings. And that smiling face on the right is Gaston, who's a member of Local 3, the Electrical Workers Union. GCF graduates are truly alumni for life, and to date, we have over 540. Our average placement rate is 83%. So this number that you see here is really just focused on that broader sector. And you'll see that the great majority of our folks are employed in energy and buildings. And those are some examples of job titles there. Now, as I mentioned, GCF invests in our alumni and makes this lifelong commitment. We continue their career pathway development through career counseling, on-the-job coaching, access to additional technical trainings to achieve career advancement, and related follow-up support services, because it's not just about that one job. It's really, how do you gain enough knowledge and exposure to understand that a single green job can lead to a full career path? So as a whole, we need to embrace the path it takes to build interest, to boost skills and foster connection in order to formulate a career. And it's really important to couple investments in communities with funding not only for training, but also wraparound services that benefit both employees and employers to boost job retention and connect people to family-sustaining wages. And so partnership truly is key. I know Gary's going to talk about the amazing apprenticeship programs that exist. We think of ourselves as pre-apprenticeship. If we could go to the last slide, please. So, in closing, getting proven workforce programs such as Green City Force in the rooms with the right people can really make a difference. We want to be able to fully structure and systematize paths into the skilled trades. We want to be working together to build social, environmental, and economic equity in New York. So thank you so much. I'm happy to answer questions later, and you can reach out to me. My contact information is on that last slide there. Thank you.
Mara, thanks so much. It was good to hear about the great work you're doing at Green City Force. What I was hearing was this is really focused on helping young leaders emerge on their career journey path through training, your partnership with NYCHA as a baseline mechanism. I appreciated the beyond energy piece, the whole sustainability aspect, and the target towards national service, and really trying to get people connected to this idea of civic responsibility and grit. I think you call that passion and perseverance, with an eye towards really getting people those essential skills. The rest of it doesn't work until you have those essential skills. We hear that all the time, and particularly when we're wanting to do something about a just transition and be inclusive, those skills really matter. You really have the full breadth of offerings too, by blending in the alumni hood, as you called it, to create that matching opportunity to help people actually get jobs, and then that pivot towards, most of the jobs are actually landing right where, at least for decarbonization, we need them. So thank you very much, Mara. That was wonderful and helpful. And with that, I think we will pivot to Gary. Welcome,
Okay.
Gary.
Welcome. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, just my name is Gary Barber. I'm the president of the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York. Real quickly, that organization represents over 100,000 unionized construction workers, 15 national and international unions with 46 local affiliates. So it's a large organization, the largest council of its kind nationally. And what I really want to talk about today and spend my 3 to 5 minutes is, first of all, let me say that Jeff, Ellen, and Mara, ditto to everything you've said. Great presentations so far, and thank you. But what I really want to talk about today and spend my brief amount of time on is apprentice programs, apprentice readiness programs. First, let me just say that the New York City Building Trades Council, through all these various individual local union apprentice programs, labor management programs, we train thousands of people a year in these programs through general recruitments as well as through our pre-apprentice programs. And that's really what I want to talk about today, is just our pre-apprentice programs and a newly formed organization that we call the Apprentice Readiness Collective, or ARC. And the idea is that our 4 primary pre-apprentice programs work in a collective so that we're not competing with each other and that we can really get into underserved communities. And so could you go to the next slide real quickly? Thank you. So I want to just give you some data. These numbers are just numbers that talk about our pre-apprentice program. And this is just a snapshot of the highlights of 2019, right? So we've had, in terms of our apprentice programs, almost 5,000 people that were interested in the programs. Again, some of these individuals are able to get into through general recruitment, but we have these 4 programs, which I mentioned. It's helmets to hard hats for veterans. It's non-traditional employment for women. It is which is solely based on bringing females into the trades. It is construction skills, which is a program that really is directed originally at youth communities, right, in dealing with high schools, but now we have an adult program. I'll talk a little bit about that and the genesis of that. And then P2A, which is Pathways to Apprenticeship, which is for formally justice involved individuals. As you can see, last year alone, these programs, pre-apprentice, these are not apprentice trainings, these are pre-apprentice trainings. Since we created this readiness, trained 632 people. Of those 632 people, 512 were placed by the end of 2019 through these direct entry programs. Again, these are direct entry programs, which means you don't have these individuals that get in and in a pre-apprentice program do not have to go through general recruitment. They have a direct entry and they're right in after they successfully complete their pre-apprentice training right into a local union's apprentice program. Next slide, please. Now, when we talk about the development of workforce and workforce development, we often talk about underserved communities. This slide just simply points out that the vast majority of all of the individuals and candidates that came through the apprentice program, 76% of them were New York City residents, which I think is very important. There's always been a lot of conjecture about the New York City building trades really isn't people that live in New York City. Well, in fact, we are, and it is that organization and certainly as time goes on, our numbers of New York City residents are actually growing every year. But you can see 76% of all of these individuals are residents of New York City. Next slide, please. Now, this is a very important slide, especially, again, because some of the old rhetoric about the New York City building trades not being diverse. You will see that over 70%, 71% of individuals that were placed were minorities, actually a little higher than that. This is something that is so important when we talk about diversity. And especially when we talk about underserved communities and creating real opportunity for middle-class careers, often these communities are largely minority communities. So this is a great example of the good work that the local unions and the apprentice collective, the readiness collectives is really doing. We're really focusing on underserved communities. Next slide, please. And as we're changing slides, one of the things that I want to mention is that a unionized career in the construction industry, addresses all of those issues that we've all been talking about in terms of inequity and in terms about having a real opportunity for a middle-class life. When you go through an apprentice program, it is not like you're getting a job. You are getting a career. And this new era in which we're going to go into in terms of retrofits and greening our climate, this is a real opportunity to create these jobs, to create these careers, I should say, create these career paths. And that's why it's important that this work be covered under such things as prevailing wage and project labor agreements. And I want to mention something also. When you see those numbers about our placements, it's about 15% of the overall intake and recruitment. But when we did a project labor agreement with the city of New York for Sandy Build It Back, we specifically, because we knew the amount of work that was there, we tailored an agreement, and we actually had almost 30% of local residents from impacted areas that went in through these direct entry programs. So when we talk about NYSERDA, we talk about all this work coming. There are many things that we can do through the Building Trades Council to create more opportunity and have direct entry, using our direct entry programs to put people into these middle class careers. This slide simply shows that, again, very proud of this, that of those placements in 2019, 35% of them were women. Again, we are trying to bring more women, more diversity into the trades. And I think the next slide is just, the next slide is real quickly, yes. And that's just, the Apprentice Readiness Collective. So let me wrap this up as quickly as I can with a few final comments. I want to say that in all of the conversations that we've had through Climate Jobs over the last several years, I serve as one of the executive council members. We have always said all along, when it comes to this work that is coming, there needs to be just transition. These need to be good union construction jobs that lead to career paths. Outside of this arena of work as well, and that it is so critically important that these jobs are this opportunity is really focused on, as I said, a just transition. This is a great opportunity here for us, and I want to say that we don't need to recreate the wheel. We don't want to be in competition with other training programs. We can collaborate. We can find ways to create partnerships, as Mara was saying earlier. And the example that she put up with that gentleman, he's a local 3 member. We can do this with all of the stakeholders, but the building trades, we have world-class training centers. Nationally, $2 billion a year is spent on training through the building trades apprentice programs. It is really second to none. And, if you look at the skyline of New York City, and you look at the complexity of airports that we're, LaGuardia Airport, for example, or any of the amazing structures that we see in New York City, you got to understand and remember that that's built by union hands. That's built with the skill, and that's with the training and the safety and all the things that are paramount in the construction industry. And I want to wrap it up by saying that if we can build airports and such, magnificent buildings as the One World Trade Center, or we built, the Hudson Yards and really rebuilt and created neighborhoods, we certainly have the ability to train workers and members, bring people in, give them opportunity to meet all of the needs, the training needs and the capacity needs for this next decade in this arena of climate change and greening our climate. So I want to thank you all very much, and it's been a real honor and a pleasure for me to be on the panel. Thank you.
Gary, thanks so much. Good to hear about the Building and Construction Trades Council, and specifically in this case, ARC. The numbers are really speak for themselves. It's really impressive to have 5,000 people interested in a pre-apprenticeship program in a year, and over 600 trained and 500 placed. And that your wrapper at the end is buoyed by your data around the impact you're having in placements on where, what, the race placement, gender. So really impressive. And I loved your kind of passion around the end of very much pushing out the career path piece through unions, and connecting that with the necessity of a just transition, and the notion that we all can get there better if we collaborate instead of compete. So thank you so much, Gary. Really appreciate those thoughts.
Thank you, Scott.
And next and last on this panel is Mark Bremmer. So Mark, take it away.
All right, thank you, Scott, and the other panelists. Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Bremer, faculty member at SUNY Polytechnic Institute in Utica, New York, and principal investigator on the project funded by the New York State Performance Improvement Fund. Thank you for this opportunity to present this project we call the Green Building Experiential Learning Collaborative. So much more information can be found about this project at our website, sunypoly.edu/GBELC. New York State has a long history of building green buildings, especially the State University. We've had LEED Silver or higher standards requirements since 2004. But we believe that SUNY students shouldn't just be learning and living in green buildings, but also from those green buildings. So that's why we sought to make our campuses into living laboratories by connecting those green infrastructure to the curriculum. So we developed new courses that we designed where students are involved with certifying the green buildings on our campuses and also in reaching out to our local communities. We're also helping to develop the New York State workforce by having students in these courses prepare for and take a credentialing exam before they graduate. So lead green associate or accredited professional as some examples. So far, we've had 95 of our students take or will soon take the exam. The semester just ended, and we have a 75% pass rate. To support these courses, our faculty and staff are also developing their own expertise by achieving their own accreditations. An important part of our mission is to scale capabilities across the state by doing things like this, sharing our best practices and with others, and growing our capacity by doing things like measuring indoor air quality with our own equipment and our own expertise. Next slide, please. Central part of our approach is having undergraduate students participate in the building certification, as I mentioned. So you might ask, what parts of the certification, which are quite complex, can students handle? And the answer is actually quite a bit. In courses we've run in 2019 and 2020 at Poly and our partner campus, SUNY College of Environmental Sciences and Forestry in Syracuse, we familiarize students with the LEED version 4.1, existing buildings operations and maintenance system. They track building performance in energy, water, waste, transportation, and human experience. And then the buildings are awarded points towards certification based on performance. Students were organized into teams to work on each of these LEED categories. They worked with our campus energy managers to conduct level 1 ASHRAE energy audits to analyze system performance and identify potential upgrades that would provide energy savings. Students uploaded utility data for electric, gas, solar thermal, solar PV, and water to a platform called ARC, which is what LEED uses to assess points on performance. Students conducted waste audits, tracked building occupancy to support transportation survey, occupant satisfaction survey. They conducted indoor air quality monitoring with CO2 and volatile organic compound levels with handheld meters. Next slide, please. Another aspect of our project is an exciting new addition to the Poly Utica campus. This is a rendering of Hilltop Residence Hall, which is currently under construction. We have an anticipated occupancy of fall 2020. It's 77,000 square feet with 257 beds. It's equipped with a geothermal HVAC system and has a modeled energy use intensity of just 27 kBTU per square foot. Importantly, it's the first ever SUNY net zero carbon building. In addition to exceeding existing code, the site infrastructure is included to support a future on-site solar PV array. To achieve the International Living Future Institute zero carbon certification, the building needs to use equal to or less than the energy annually that it produces through the renewable sources. This is what we're considering a living laboratory. It'll be connected to our curriculum via another new course, an interdisciplinary course in which students will both track how the building actually performs compared to the energy model and conduct some life cycle assessments to determine embodied carbon for some of the building components. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, a major objective of the project is workforce development. So we're diligently tracking our students' job and internship placements after taking one of our courses. We ask them if their experience with certification projects and gaining that LEED credential were helpful in securing them a job or internship. And so far, we have found that at least some of the students reporting back to us do find that their project experience or their credential directly is helpful in finding a job or internship. We're also working with U.S. Green Building Council members in local chapters to connect our graduates with mentors in the green building industry. Next slide, please. And one final aspect I'll share with you is our expansion into online delivery of green building courses. For fall 2020, courses taught by our partners at SUNY Oneonta are now available for registration statewide on Open SUNY. These courses combine the experiential aspects of working with real building utility data and other sustainability metrics with the flexibility of an asynchronous online teaching and learning environment. This approach allows us to expand our workforce development efforts and offer additional accreditations to non-residential students, non-traditional students, which is especially valuable during the current pandemic restrictions that may end up continuing for quite some time. So with that, I'll wrap it up. Thank you again for the opportunity to share our experiences with the SUNY Green Building Experiential Learning Collaborative. You can feel free to contact me directly. My email address is bremmerm@sunypoly.edu, and I look forward to a fruitful discussion.